With the story of Mary and Martha, we are once again faced with a narrative that makes us think about the creative tension that we often need to deal with as followers of Jesus Christ. Tension between apparently contradictory ideas. Today, that tension seems to lie between two different ways of being a Christian. I would call them being and doing. That keeps it simple. Some of us are more into being, and some of us are more into doing. But being and doing are actually two sides of the same coin. And we know that as we are called together weekly to assemble as Christ's body, it is both to be Christ and to do Christ. That is, to continue to do his work in the world. Our worship is focused on transforming us as people, transforming our being, and then sending us out to do the work that Christ has given us to do, which is obviously doing. This is internal transformation, followed by the outward fruit of that transformation. We grow more Christ-like so that we are better able to do his work. It seems simple enough. But even though these two things are both equally necessary parts of being Christian, the reality is some people are primarily beers, and some people are primarily doers. Because of the way we are made, and the way our gifts vary from person to person, it's most common for an individual Christian, for each of us, to focus either on the business of our own personal transformation, or on the business of getting the more tangible work of Christ done in the world around us. It shouldn't be that way, I suppose. Still, it is that way. And that's why God places us in bodies called churches, so that we can integrate two emphases. So amid all the other varieties of members in the church, we end up with two basic kinds of Christians, I would say. On the one hand, there are meditative, prayerful, listening Christians focused mostly on their own spiritual growth and internal environment. And then there are activists, folks driven by the need to extend hospitality, to do justice, and to build community. Neither kind of Christian is more right or wrong. We should all be both. Unfortunately, sometimes we who operate in one camp begin to think that the other kind of Christian is wrong or unnecessary. Sometimes we lose sight of the fact that it's all about Jesus, and because of Jesus, and for Jesus, that we do whatever we do. Being and doing. We are called to both as Jesus followers. We are called to become more and more Christ-like, to be converted to him through and through, a process that requires sitting at his feet and drinking him in. And we are called to be as concerned for the world as he is, and to do something about it, as he did, and as he still wants to do through us. Today, Martha gets scolded, although very gently. It's not so much a scolding as it is a reality check. Apparently for being concerned about housework and cooking and other activity that needs to be done when company shows up, versus sitting at Jesus' feet and sitting and listening to his teaching. But that's not quite right. If we read our story carefully, we can see that Martha is not doing anything wrong in and of itself. In fact, she's practicing the hospitality and service that would be expected of any disciple in her position. Rather, her problem lies in the spirit in which she's doing this work, and the reason for her work, and the kind of ownership that she takes of that work. First of all, we should notice that it is Martha who welcomes Jesus into her home. So she is the one that is initially extending hospitality. And therefore, she's the one who feels like she is the host or hostess. She's taking responsibility for being host, and therefore she feels an amount of investment in how successful the whole event will turn out. In this case, sort of an ad hoc supper party or dinner party. But Martha becomes distracted by what she has to get done. And And suddenly, for her, the purpose is no longer making space for Jesus in her life, but rather getting her list of activities done successfully. She makes her service about herself and her sense of accomplishment. Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me. My sister. Me. Myself. Me. No question like, Jesus, how important is it to you that I get all this stuff done by a certain time? Because I'd really like to spend some time listening to you as well. The pressure is on. We hear so often the message of James, be doers of the word and not hearers only. And yet today Jesus himself says there is only one thing that is necessary, and Mary has chosen the better way. Presumably, James was there when Jesus said that. And he was there when Jesus said a lot of other things too. So what do? The fact is, both those of us who tend to be Marys and those of us who tend to be Marthas should realize that if we do whatever we do for Christ, in the name of Christ, in order to be like Christ, then we will eventually become more like the members of the body whose ministries and passions we may not now understand. Those of us who focus on doing the hands-on work of Christ for others will begin to be transformed in our inner being to be more like the Lord that we are imitating. Likewise, those of us who focus more directly on our personal relationship with Christ, who are more attentive to sitting at his feet perhaps, praying, listening, searching within ourselves for that which needs transformation, we will urgently begin to feel the need to do more about what he calls us to do in the world. We can't become more like Jesus without also wanting to do more of what Jesus wanted to do and still wants to do. We care about what he cares about. Perhaps a lesson we should take away from this story is that no matter how much we feel like it is us being the host, us feeding the homeless, us providing money for ministry, us providing shelter and travel for families looking for employment, us. Eventually, like Martha, like she was reminded when dinner was finally served that night in her house, eventually Jesus takes the bread that we hand him, and he takes us in his hands as well. And he breaks that bread, and he breaks us. And we are reminded that it is Jesus who is always really the host. It is Jesus who is always really doing the ministry that we think we are doing by ourselves. Jesus blesses what we give him. As we are broken, he gives it away. Our ministry, the work that we do in Jesus' name, that we claim we do for Jesus, that we try to do as if we're doing it for Jesus himself, this ministry is not ours to give or to keep. It's not ours to feel angry about or to take personally. It is his. And because it is his, he gives it away, as any good host would do. But a second lesson we would do well to take away from this story has to do with distraction. Martha was not corrected for her hard work of meal preparation and being hospitable. She was corrected for being distracted by those things to the point where she ceased to make her guest the focus. She was multitasking, and she was worried and distracted by many things. How often do you find yourself in a room with friends or other members of your family, and even though you are together, the TV is on. Each person, while claiming to watch TV, perhaps, is also working on a laptop or a tablet, perhaps listening to music even at the same time, maybe even carrying on a telephone conversation. Nobody is talking to the other people in the room. The point of being together has totally been lost. Because the people who are in each other's presence are paying no attention to each other's presence. If a person laughs, you don't know what they're laughing at. Was it something funny on the TV, or something that popped up on their computer, or something they heard on their headphones, or something that a friend said to them on the cell phone? It certainly was not something that everybody was talking about. We are so used to paying attention to 2 or 3 or 4 things at a time that it has become a habit. And we have forgotten how to give one thing or one person our undivided attention. But this is what Jesus gently reminds Martha about. And he reminds us as well. He deserves our undivided attention. After all, as Paul reminds us this morning, quoting a hymn from the early churches, Jesus Christ is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, who is also the firstborn from the dead, so that all things which were created in him and through him and for him might be restored and returned to proper relationship with God the Father by him. It is he whom we proclaim. It is Christ whom we proclaim. All that God has done, he has done through him. Jesus is more important than our to-do lists. Our hospitality, our ministry, our work, it is not our own. We do not proclaim ourselves. Jesus is the host and the source of all of our hospitality and ministry. It is his ministry, not ours. He is our focus, not the details that we are so tempted to be worried about, and not what other people might think about what we're doing. All good that we do comes from him and flows back to him. As we sit at his feet, pay attention to what he tells us, and become more like him, we are inclined more and more to do his work. And doing his work changes our beings. Let us all choose the one good thing, so that as we are transfixed and transformed and compelled to do all the other good things that flow from Christ in us, the hope of glory, we may imitate both Mary and Martha in the best way possible.